Let's talk about what was it? We were going to talk about your second try at a 30 year, 30 year. What was the exact phrasing?
Uh, my second attempt at becoming a novelist.
Okay, let's talk about what was your first attempt?
Well, I wanted to be a writer since, well, not a writer, but a novelist since reading Stephen King's Salem's Lot back when I was 11 years old. Um, and I know you've talked about different things that when you were younger that motivated you. For me, and it's odd because I remember being a teenager thinking when I'm going to college, what am I actually going to college for? What is it I'm trying to do? But the dream of being a novelist never went away. And so I actually had some help winning some scholarships for my writing that got me to help launch me to college. And I got there, and really the only thing that I was really enthusiastic about taking was an advanced creative writing class. And that was I had put all my eggs in that basket, and off I wanted to go and be the next Stephen King. And like most lessons in life, they're painful, and but you learn from them. And for me, it was that I wasn't as good as a writer as I imagined that I was. And the college writing professor really made no bones about pointing that out. And it was shattering. It was life changing. And as it turns out, it was probably for the best because it forced me to do the one thing that most writers actually need to be effective, which was go out and have a life. And I was lucky enough to go out and actually change career direction. I became a law enforcement officer, which really wasn't on my radar. And I did it, I think, for no other reason other than my uncle had been a cop in a nearby town for 35 years, and he was somebody I looked up to, and so I decided I'd give that a shot. And I got hired in 1985 by the Portland Police Department, and the rest was history. And I literally hung up my fictional ability, my talent for writing or my love for writing. I just thought was dead. That was it. I was going to move on and grow up the way we all do, and no longer get to play Peter Pan. And fate had another idea in mind for me.
And that was
Well, so really, I think the catalyst was there were a lot of things I think that were catalysts, but one of them was I met a woman by the name of Kate Flora, and Kate was a fiction writer who I met when she came to the police station at 109 Middle. She was co-authoring a true crime novel, which ended up being called Finding Amy, and it was about a murder that we actually worked. It was 6 weeks of trying to find the body of this woman who had been taken from Portland at gunpoint and murdered and buried by the bad guy. And it was one of those cases that really stands out in your career. And she co-authored that novel with my boss at that time, Lieutenant Joe Laughlin. And through Kate, I started getting a glimpse of what true crime books were like and what fictional crime was like, because she had already had several series running. And I started reading again something other than Stephen King. And I still had no idea that I was going to be a writer. This was probably in '01. And then my wife bought me an iPad. And after I got done wasting my life playing words with friends, as we do, I discovered there were other things you could do with the iPad. And that was right. And I literally sat down and started playing around with the WordPad app. And characters began to spill out that would later become some of the people in my Detective Byron mystery series.
how did you feel about that? I mean, did you think that this old dream was coming back, or
Yeah, I mean, you could feel it. There's no question. I felt the pull, and my love of it really did come roaring back. I tempered my expectations with, let's just see if I can finish something. Like all I had done to that point was write short stories. And I said, geez, let's just see if I can write a novel. And before long, I admitted to my wife what I was up to. My detectives that worked for me at the police station found out what I was up to. And I thought they would be the toughest to get past. I could imagine them laughing and making fun of me about it. But they were very supportive, and they all wanted to know who would play them in the movie. Kind of, that's what the kind of ribbing I was getting. They were actually way ahead of where I imagined I was going to go with this. But I just wanted to finish a book. And it turned out it took 2.5 years to finish what we all like to call the drawer novel. And that was such a learning experience for me. When I finished that, there was no question that I would write another book.
Did your wife know she was doing that when she got you the iPad?
She liked to take credit for that being the catalyst, but I don't know that she actually imagined that that would happen. But when it did, I think nobody was probably more pleased than she was by it.
That's wonderful to have that support.
It definitely is. She's been there. I couldn't do what I do without her.
So fast forward then to this second career. Tell us about what you've done, and tell us from that drawer novel what happened next.
So really the big thing then was Kate had been trying to drag me down to a conference called the New England Crime Bake, which had been running for, I don't know, a dozen plus years, maybe longer. And I was really apprehensive about going to a crime writer convention because I didn't feel like I belonged. And I think I made an excuse not to go the first year while I was still writing the drawer novel. And when I finally finished it, I was enthusiastic about attending because I thought, well, geez, I've written something really good here, or I think it's really good. Kate didn't shatter my dreams; she let me find out for myself. And I got down to that conference, and I think by midday on Saturday, I had figured out that I had not written the great American novel, and that I mentally was keeping tally. And based on what I was hearing from writers and publishers and people that were sitting on panels at that point, I had done about 99% of the things they tell you that first-time writers do. I had done them, all the wrong things. And, for a second, I was bummed out about it. And then I started to get enthusiastic because I thought, well, I've done the hardest part of this, which is actually complete a novel. I've written a novel, albeit not a good novel, but, I've done something that I can do. So now the trick is to do it again, but do it better. And I was really kind of pumped up about it. I still love the underlying premise of what I had written, but the novel I realized wasn't going to cut it. And so there were all these ideas I had to improve on the story and to write a brand new book. And so when the conference got over that Sunday, I made the 2.5-hour trek back to Maine, and I literally recorded little snippets on my phone of what would become the synopsis for this new book. And I got home and I was very excited about it. And I sat down with my wife and I said, hey, look, I've been doing all these other things since I retired from the police department. And, they've helped bring in money, but they're not going to further my dream. And this writing thing is a lot harder than I imagined it would be. And I think to do it and do it justice, I've got to do it full time or not bother. And I said, there's no money in that when you're trying to figure out how to get published. And I said, I guess I'm looking for your support. And I tell people that she looked me in the eye and she said, well, I've carried you for the last 30 years. So what's a little longer? But she actually didn't say that, but it makes a better story. But no, she said, you know what, then stop talking about it. Go do it. You've got the tools, you've got the passion for it. Go do it. And it was that simple. And that was November of 2014. And by April of 2015, I had a brand new 92,000 word manuscript that would ultimately become, a year and a half later, Among the Shadows, my first Byron book.
That's wonderful.
And things went at a lightning pace after that. It's you heard my speech, be careful what you wish for. It's amazing how fast things take off when they finally hook. I had no idea that any of these things that have happened to me were going to happen.
And tell us about where you are right now.
Oh, so at the moment, actually, you're the first to hear this officially, but I just signed another 4-book contract with Severn River to put out a new police procedural series, another Maine-centric series, and that will make when the dust has settled from that will make 12 novels that I will have published. My Byron series is at the moment capped at 4. HarperCollins did not wish to put out the 5th book, but that still lives on in my head. So we'll see what happens in the future. And I am currently co-writing. I'm halfway through a 4-book contract with Lindy Walker. We are co-authoring a series called The Turner and Mosley Files. which is sort of a mystery slash action adventure treasure hunting series. And I've got a lot of stuff happening here. It's crazy. It's crazy how fast this happens.
That's wonderful. And what is your advice for people who are starting out?
I think the first thing you have to do, and the most important thing you have to do, is remember why you're doing this. If your reason for doing it is because you love writing, you love the written word, you love playing around in your head and living in that imaginary world that you are creating, then you have all you need to become a successful author. And it's just a question then of working trying to hone your talent, hone your writing ability, hone your editing ability, and hone your patience, because this is that kind of business. Everything takes time. But if you really want to do it, it's really, we all chase, the the golden goose is publication, but that should never be your motivation. Your motivation should be write just the best writing that you can possibly write. Read as much as you can possibly read, and aspire to be as good or better than the writers that you look up to, because they've all been where you are, and they've all had to read other writers, and they've all had to hone their own skills. So it's a question of you wanting to do that bad enough that you get your shot. And I don't think it's any more to it than that.
That's wonderful. When you were a police officer, a detective, did
Mm-hmm.
you even think about the writing, miss the writing as you were going through your regular job?
No, it's funny. I tell people that there are probably defense attorneys that would argue the point that I hadn't written fiction for 30 years. But the truth is that there's nothing fun about writing in police work or detective work. Everything is bare bones. There's not a lot of room for adjectives or that type of stuff. It's just the facts, ma'am. Is what they expect out of you. So everything is boilerplate. It's very boring. You're taking statements all the time. You're writing. I think if there was one thing that was similar, and it certainly didn't occur to me at that time that there would ever be a time that I would write fiction again. But I think if there was one thing that was similar that actually did help me, it was writing cohesively. Everything that we did had to have, it had to make sense. You do one thing before you do the next. Building timelines for putting a case together, doing interviews with witnesses, and then figuring out how they all fit together, and being able to make a cohesive story or narrative out of that to be able to explain to a judge or a jury or a prosecutor, for that matter. So as far as story building was concerned, I think that might have been something that actually I was learning at that point, because that's exactly how a real case gets made. I wasn't thinking about it in terms of me writing later on, but I think it's something that helped me, because I think my brain works that way. I know how cases were worked, I know how cases were solved, and I know why cases stalled out. And so I think all of those things really allow me to be able to better describe what real police work is like in my fictional novels.
So when you came out and started writing, how much of the police work transferred over, and how much was fiction from your head?
Um, I made a deal with myself when I first started out that I wouldn't write anything that was actually based on a real case. I had enough true crime. I had seen what the real life cases had done to people, the survivors, the victims, families, that type of thing. And I didn't want to do anything that would cause people pain by fictionalizing something that had been part of their lives. So I made the deal with myself that I would write as realistically as I possibly could, but I would never base any of the books on an actual case that I had worked. And I've so far, knock on wood, been able to stand by that. I think the only exception to that would be if it was, something that actually had a reason. Maybe the family came to me and asked me to do that or something like that. There had to be a reason for it, though. And so when I started writing, I was able to draw from a well of, a million experiences, things that really we tamp down deep inside and you don't think about, that affect, who I am and how I see the world. And I think in my mind, I imagined I was just going to be making up stuff and that would be it. There's nothing but my imagination. There would be nothing personal about what I was writing, and it was just going to be fun. And like everything that you delve into that you don't actually know, I had no idea that I was going to be diving into the real stuff, like dipping the ladle into that emotional well and pulling out chunks of things from my past. There were scenes that I have written that actually emotionally moved me as I was writing them. And it's because what I'm writing is actually based on something that happened in real life, and I'm crafting it in such a way that it fits into the narrative of the story that I'm writing. But the goal of me doing that is really to be able to evoke emotion from the reader, which I think is the most important thing any of us can do. You want the reader to feel something. You want them to be lost in your story. And I really didn't think that was going to happen, but it's amazing what I dredged up and what I had continued to dredge up as I'm writing those fictional police procedural stories.
Some of the writers I talk to talk about how it's, writing is therapy. Did you find it cathartic coming from your previous life?
I did. I think that was another shock. I really didn't think that there was any catharsis involved in what I was doing. But like I say, when you start delving back into things that you thought you had either forgotten about or you thought they were long past, it really allowed me to deal with things. I think it allowed me to deal with, the things that I wasn't happy about when I left the job, the things that I wish I could unsee or unexperience. As a writer, I really was able to pull off of those. I think you and I have talked about this in the past. I honestly think the best writing comes from adversity. Anything that's been difficult that the writer themselves have gone through in life translates to the page very well. And I think that's one of those things where if you can insert those moments into your characters' lives, your reader can't help but identify with them. So for me, I just had the luxury of having the life that we all have, the ups and downs and the highs and lows and the death and the love and all those things that we have to experience. But added to that, I had 30 years of absolutely crazy front row seat to the world as a law enforcement officer. So using all of that, I think, has made my stories that much more realistic and maybe that much more entertaining because it gives the reader a glimpse inside what that world is really like.
So you have this front row seat, and then we readers read that, and we want to write that, but we haven't had that experience. Is it even possible for us to get to that point that we could write something like that?
It is, and I tell people that all the time. I say you just have to channel your experiences differently. I think, like I said, we all have experiences, things that are heart wrenching or things that are horrifying or whatever it is in your life. They just don't happen with as great a frequency as they would happen for a police officer. And we all know what it's like to be frustrated working for a business or being part of a dysfunctional family or whatever it is. Everybody has something. And so I tell people to use that in your stories and try to imagine, you can learn the procedure. You might not have those real world experiences, but you can learn the procedure, especially from reading other writers who do it well. But use your own experiences, insert that in there. One of the things that I think is the easiest for people to think about is how hard it is to try and hold down a job like, you go to work and you may see the most horrific murder happen and you're dealing with the angst that the family or witnesses, that the witness is suffering. And you're carrying that with you. And then you come home and you try to deal with a real world, like where other people don't see that stuff. Like your spouse is worried that the dishwasher is leaking water onto the kitchen floor. And that's the worst thing that's happened all day long, right? That the house is stressed out because of that. And it's really hard to come home. It's almost like you have to lead a split personality. It's hard to come home and show the empathy that your spouse needs for that particular tragedy when you're carrying all those other tragedies from the day and you're not going to share those with them because you don't want that darkness in your house. I tell people, try to envision what that would be like and then pull from your own life the adversity that you've experienced or you've seen and use that as a way to make the story real and the characters real. The procedure, like I said, you can steal that procedure from good books, Get to know your local law enforcement officer, somebody who's actually squared away that will share that information with you. Don't get it from television necessarily. We all know but some of that is because some of it's laziness, some of it's because you have a very short time constraint to try and get a story told. So they take huge liberties with reality. But if you can take that stuff and try to put yourself in the shoes of the detective and use your own experiences, you can bring a detective to life.
You think anybody can do it?
I do. I do think that you just have to pull from the right parts of your life. And again, like I say, if you spend enough time with somebody who's actually done the job and get them to tell you, it's not just what we do, it's how we feel. And the feeling, I think, is a lot of times what's missing from those stories. If you want to tell a real gritty police detective story, you have to have feeling in that. That's the one thing we all pretend we don't have. We keep the stone face, we go to work, we do our thing, and we pretend to be, the counselor, or we pretend to be the person doing the interrogation. But at the end of the day, we're still just human beings, and we're absorbing all these things like everybody else does. So, yeah, you just have to see that, get to hear that from somebody for real, and you'll know what will make your detective tick.